Well, everybody, welcome to World Edition. I'm Nick Palavita. I'm not your host. We're waiting for either Mark Lee or Steve to show up. Steve is probably in Washington, D.C. today because he met with the Queen, Kamala Harris, yesterday in Durham. So when you meet with the Queen and you have an audience with the Queen, or you have to go where they are. But we do have some people that did show up, and we'll bring in the person who actually heads one of our top-rated shows, Russia, China, Ukraine, Russia, China. Let's bring in Sasha Starr. Sasha, welcome back to the World Edition.
Hello.
I don't know where Mark is, okay, but I think Steve told me yesterday, since he met with Kamala Harris, he's got Potomac fever. He had to go to Washington, D.C. today. So the thing is, I don't know what he's doing in Washington, D.C., but it is what it is. And of course, we do have from the other coast, the right coast, the only person who's right here, the professor himself, Professor Dan Worthington. Dan, welcome to World Edition again. Al, the thing is, see, these people are totally prepared on the topics. I'm not, because I was busy. I didn't have time to watch the news today. So I guess we can get an update, Sasha, because I know you've been following the war in Ukraine, and it looks like it's still going on. So give us an update what's going on in the Ukraine war.
It's not the easiest thing to do because I don't want to go on for hours, but I'd like to be mindful of a great Russian attack which is being prepared now. And Putin seems to me that he wants to finish his attack and do it, whatever he wants to do, before February 20th. That's kind of a date where he is scheduled to talk to his parliament, so-called Duma, and so-called parliament at the same time. So you can call it either way. It's neither Duma, it's neither parliament. It's a joke. However, yeah, but what makes me optimistic about Ukrainian chances at this point is that when Putin started a full-fledged attack on Ukraine last February 24th last year, he had a huge superiority. He had momentum. Ukraine didn't have any weapons what it possesses now. Even they didn't have enough javelins or stingers, and even this purely defensive, primitive weapons which are known since war of Russians in Afghanistan in the 80s. So that's what Ukrainians started to get some shipments from the West, exactly the javelin and the stingers. And look at where Ukraine is now. It's fighting almost a year, Ukraine, the Russia, very successfully so. It now has the top weapons from the West and much more to come. So I would assess Ukrainian chances are pretty good and maybe even better than we think.
Good morning, world. How are you doing?
Hey, Steve. Yeah, we missed you. I thought you were in Washington, D.C.
No, I'm leaving tomorrow, but I'm going to go ahead and begin my monologue if that's okay, because I'm going to be gone the next few days. Give me a second here, and I'm putting back on solo so we can kind of start over if that's okay. So, well, good morning, world. This is Steve Rao, the host of Pod and Roku TV. We welcome you from around the world in the United States of America to talk about global affairs innovation in an increasingly turbulent and divisive world. Today, we kick off Black History Month. We're going to talk a little bit about the history of Black History Month, what it means, and why we celebrate it. But today, I want to begin my monologue, and then we're going to talk about some other things going on in the world with Tyre Nichols and, political gridlock in Congress, George Santos being forced away from his committees, and the Federal Reserve expecting to raise interest rates again in the United States, and how this is going to affect our economy and borrowing. And of course, with Sasha Starr, Russia ignoring a key nuclear arms treaty known as New START, requires Russia to allow inspections on its territory, which it is refusing to do, and how the war in Ukraine is going along with that talk about Russia. Well, today my monologue is just to open up with an exciting meeting I had on Monday with the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris. The Vice President came here to the Raleigh-Durham area to talk about small businesses. She spent a few minutes with me and some United States congressional leaders, including Congressman Wiley Nickel, Congressman Deborah Ross, Governor Roy Cooper, Congressman Valerie Fouché, the mayor of Raleigh, and a few other leaders from the region. It was an amazing experience to get to spend a few minutes with the Vice President. I was a bit surprised when her chief of staff had actually given her some information about me that I had been the longest serving Indian American. And when I met the Vice President, the first question she asked me is, "Where is your family from? You look a lot like some of my family members." I told her my father was from Chennai, and she said that's where her mother, Shyamala Rajagopalaran, had come from and met her father, who was a civil rights leader here in the United States. She said that as a young girl, she and her sister Maya would travel to India, and she called her aunts Chithis, which means aunt in India, in that part of India. It was an amazing experience to actually meet her, to spend some time with her. And I must say, she's much more impressive in person, charismatic, positive, optimistic. But the most important thing that I will emphasize today is her talk about small businesses. She actually moderated a panel at the Duke Performing Arts Center in Raleigh, where they had the Hispanic business community leaders, they had the Latino credit union, and they talked about the Biden-Harris administration's investments up to the tune of $30 billion of loans for small businesses. The Vice President talked about the challenges that small businesses have with access to capital and her experiences before she was Vice President and even a United States Senator as a lawyer, a prosecutor, but also someone who grew up with small business leaders who influenced her and her sister Maya in terms of learning about giving back to the community and the kinds of things that small businesses can do. I will say before I open up that I was impressed with the Vice President's knowledge of the issues of small business. I do believe that she will run for president. I think that she's planning to run for president. And I've got to tell you, I was much more impressed in an in-person meeting than seeing her on television. So hopefully, just in terms of the way she presents herself, I'm not sure whether she'll be able to convey the knowledge of issues as well as she did in Raleigh. But it was an amazing experience to meet the Vice President, to talk to the Vice President. And I want to thank her and the administration for taking time out of her busy schedule to visit Raleigh, to talk to small businesses, and talk about what we can be doing to help minority businesses and all businesses get access to capital so they can grow. For every small business that we create 6 jobs. Last year, our Secretary of State, Elaine Marshall, told me that she incorporated 93,000 new businesses. That's about 450,000 businesses or more created in North Carolina. Imagine if we accelerate the success of small businesses. We can even grow jobs at a much higher rate, which is definitely what we need as we begin our lives in what I call a post-COVID economy. COVID is still here, but how do we help these businesses rebuild and retool for better times? We'll talk about that today. But with us today, we have Mark Lee, our Wizard of Oz, Sasha Starr, Russian expert, Dan Worthington, conservative political analyst, and the guy, why we're all here, Nick Paladiva.
Steve, I'm glad that you're here and everything. I know that Nick's going to tease you about the visit with the Vice President. But, there's another Indian American that is officially going to announce their candidacy on the 15th. I did read that yesterday.
Yeah, I just heard that this morning.
Nikki Haley is going to be jumping into the fray and everything. So she said that on the day after Valentine's Day, the 15th, she is going to officially announce her candidacy. So I was wondering what folks thought on the panel about this and whether she stands a chance.
Before we get it, I'm just going to do a debrief on the Kamala visit, and then we're going to go to some other issues. But I did hear that in the news this morning. I will say that Nikki Haley is a very, very accomplished woman in her own right. She was a business owner. She was a legislator for only 4 years, then became the governor of South Carolina. She was a very effective governor, was there for, I think, almost 2 terms, and then became the United States ambassador to President Donald Trump, the UN ambassador. And then she left the Trump administration and now has announced she's running. I think that she would be a formidable presidential candidate. I don't know how she would distance herself from Trump because she supported Trump on many of his issues, including many of his foreign policy issues, and was relatively quiet after the insurrection, although she did say she didn't agree with it. So, I think it'll be interesting if, like, Kamala were to win the nomination, and then you had an Indian American woman who's a Republican running for the presidency against a Democrat who is half Indian, half African American, and that the presidency would only be a woman. That would be the only good thing, that if we put ourselves in a situation where the president, and I'm ready for America to have a female president. I think it's time for some new kind of leadership, and I think a woman can bring that to the Oval Office. I don't know what you guys think, but president.
I think, Steve, you're as only as strong as the people you surround yourself with. So she surrounds herself with very powerful people in Washington, D.C. Think about this one. And you surround yourself with us. So, you got to think about that for a while. But
the lost cause going out of the chute, right?
Yeah. So the thing is, but you do have a lot of viewers, so that's good. But here's the thing on the small business, since I've been involved in that for 38 years. And here's a whole cold reality, and I don't know if they emphasize this enough. 80 to 90% of these small businesses are opening up will fail in 2 to 3 years. They're out of business. Okay. And I don't know if Dan has that experience also, but what's really important is the coaching and counseling that they get before they jump into this. Oh, I'm going to start a small business, borrow a bunch of money, be very successful. It doesn't happen. And even the ones that think they have good business plans will fail. So the failure rate is extremely high. I'm not talking about failure rate of 20 to 30%. I'm talking failure rate of 80 to 90%. So those 90,000 businesses that were incorporated in the state of North Carolina last year, in 2 to 3 years, it'll be down to 10,000 or 9,000. The rest of them are all going to be out of business. And because they really overemphasize, first of all, you get no education in school. All right. I actually, Dan will love this one. I graduated from law school. I started my own law practice. I did not go work for anybody, but I can tell you it's also very hard to do that. And I'll also tell you this, through my MBA classes, my JD classes, my LM classes, they gave me this education on what you had to do to start your own business and make it successful, and you have to get lucky too. I was very lucky. I ran into 2 good clients right off the bat. Had a halfway decent business plan. But listen, if you don't hit that luck streak, you can go out of business. In other words, you need to be able to create an opportunity for you that allows revenue to come in. So as they say,
but, Nick, you're saying this, and I agree. I have many friends that are in the small business community, some of them that have been quite successful for a number of years, and all in that space, everything from restaurant owners to barbers. Actually need to see mine and everything, to a number of other fields that are out there, and they have done quite well. Some of them have survived for many more years and everything. But one of the questions I was getting ready to ask you is that a lot of our young people are, and maybe Dan's got some thoughts, none of us are exactly spring chickens here, but a lot of folks are looking at business and looking at the small business, and they are creating small businesses without necessarily a business plan, or without necessarily a college degree, or without necessarily a lot of other things that are in that space, because we are in an age where a lot of people are able to create businesses without having that background. They can go to Google University, or they can go to a number of other ways and get businesses even at the tender ages of like 8 and 9 and 10, and all in that space. So we are seeing a lot of startup businesses being started, and some of them are quite successful without the education system that we are talking about, because some of these folks are able to have some tremendous opportunities.
You're actually right. In financial services, where I worked in, the most successful people I worked in, the big degree they had, and these are what they call top of the table, making 800, 900,000 a year in income. The big degree they had was a high school education. Seriously, all the top people I worked with were going, high school education, and then they got a designation like certified financial planner or certified whatever. Okay, it's a big myth, at least in financial services. Oh, you have to have all these degrees. No, but what they did have, which most people don't have, is the drive to become successful and an intangible that they don't teach you in school. They work like dogs. I mean, seriously, from like 6 o'clock in the morning to 10 at night, they're working.
Yeah, most entrepreneurs are not working 8-hour work days. That's very much true. A lot of times they're also not just working one job, because they talk about multiple streams of income. So most of the entrepreneurs I know are not just one field entrepreneurs.
Yeah, Mark, the educators don't teach you that. If they want to be, because they're not, first, they don't know, okay? And next, they need to be honest with the students, okay? You want to be in your own business, all right? You're going to start at 6 o'clock in the morning. You're going to finish 9 or 10 at night every day, okay? Then you'll be successsul. They don't want to hear that.
Wait a minute, 9 or 10 o'clock at night, 9 or 10 o'clock at night, Dan and Sasha, and even you, Nick and Steve, have y'all noticed what time y'all get y'all's email sometimes? Sometimes the entrepreneurs are up at like 2 or 1 o'clock in the morning and everything.
2 or 3 in the morning. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, see, Mark, if you want to work the 9 to 5 shift and you want to work the 40-hour week, become an employee. Please do not start your own business. You will fail. If you're saying, I don't mind working from 6 o'clock in the morning to 10 and 12 every night, and knowing that I could fail 80 to 90% of the time, then go ahead and start your own business.
You're forgetting something else what's important for a small business. One of the first books, if not the first one, that I read after I arrived to Canada in the 70s was a book published by, I think, Johns Hopkins University. And the name of the book was Why Son of a Bitch Successful and Nice Guys Fell in Small Business.
Finish last.
All right.
That was very, very interesting reading, which is more relevant even today than it was in the 70s.
Yeah.
And in fact, and they're comparing, for example, 2 very similar businesses. And one is a nice guy, honest guy, and all his bills he pays on time and so on. And then all of a sudden he's running out of money and he needs to borrow, and nobody lends him, and he has to close the doors. And son of a bitch, he doesn't pay his bills on time. He postponed. He says, people just get lost. Okay, go and declare bankruptcy. I will send you a check in 6 months if I want to, and so on. And these people succeed because they have a cash flow, because they have cash to operate. Right. So here is another thing. What's needed in a small business is to be son of a bitch.
You have to have a little edge. I hate to say, but I agree with you.
Before we close out on this issue, because I want to talk about Russia and Nikki Haley and then a couple of other things. But I think the key is access to capital, right? I mean, we see this problem all the time. A lot of businesses have not got the PPP loans. They didn't get the small business loans. I'm working on bringing Alan Thomas, who's in the Biden administration. He works for the president on a small business recovery. He's coming here in the middle of March to Morrisville, Cary area for an event, a town hall meeting with Congressman Nickel, where we're really talking about the programs to put businesses in place, because it's cash. Not having enough on-hand capital, and the venture investors and angel investors aren't making these aggressive investments. That's what they always say, at least in North Carolina. And I'm curious, if you're listening to this around the world, what is it like in other countries? Now, yesterday, Benjamin Netanyahu, we're going to talk about that at the end of the week, the prime minister of Israel, who's serving his 6th term as prime minister, got knocked out, came back in. He talked about how Israel is really leading in innovation and small business creation, So there's a lot of civilian technology that Israel is able to provide the rest of the world. And he said that's why it's very important as well for all the other reasons. Of course, he was an ally of Trump, not so much now anymore because of the insurrection issues. But that's something to think about. But we'll come back to this issue. Let's shift real quickly to Russia and this New START agreement. Sasha, could you give us insight of that and just any insight about the war in Ukraine?
Well, that was expected, that Russia will not allow no inspection of weapons or so on. What's very interesting information I just got is that tomorrow Putin is planning to visit a city of Volgograd, which is best known for his old name, Stalingrad. Mm-hmm. And by the way, right by the time that Putin will be in Volgograd, the city will return its old name, Stalingrad, just for the Putin's visit, and may retain that name for time.
I thought it was Putingrad.
That's something. Probably St. Petersburg will become St. Putinsburg.
Putingrad. Okay.
Yeah, Putingrad.
Hey,
Now,
speaking of which,
Curtain grab.
but
Yeah.
what's the most important thing is that they've got a new huge memorial to Stalin, which Putin will open up tomorrow. So they are now, it's like coming back to the past. Instead of back to the future, now back to the past. So now Stalin, who was discredited as a killer of tens of millions of Soviet citizens. So you see, unlike Hitler, Stalin was killing his own people. Hitler was killing everybody else, and of course, the atrocities against Jews, Holocaust, and so on. No, Stalin didn't need anything of that. Why to go anywhere to kill somebody when he has so many citizens right there inside Russia? He was killing them, he was sending them to Gulag where they were dying, and so on. And there is an interesting theory which probably makes it even more relevant today. It was calculated that to have 50 million people in Gulag, they needed at least the same number of guards, the people who, or the prosecutors, judges, the people who are taking people from houses to jails and from jails to Gulag, transportation, so on. They needed about the same number of people. Now, guess what are your chances in Gulag? Most people were dying. So those people who returned after Stalin's death, they were already old, sick people. Now, on the other hand, the guards and all the people who participated in this killing machine, they were doing very well. And they had children and grandchildren and so on, unlike those who went through Gulag. So in this case, majority of today's population of Russia are descendants of the guards and people who were murdering or helping to murder people in Gulag. So in this case, you understand what kind of population, or most of the population Russia has, are descendants of criminals, of war crimes, criminals primarily. And this is explained perhaps Russian policy on Ukraine. Now, Ukraine is getting ready for Russian attack. There are rumors that Putin wants to decide everything by February 20th. Where he's planning to address his, as I said earlier, this wonderful parliament by the name Duma. It's neither Duma, it's neither parliament, it's a bunch of idiots who are supporting Putin 100%. Yes, you did. You heard it right. Idiots.
No, but idiots is definitely a good word. But Sasha, one of the things I've heard, and I'd love to hear your take on both of these, is that leadership group, whatever they're called, the ones that are supposed to be the ones that are running the military, and they are like hired guns for hire and all in that space. But one of those guys is saying, the leader is that he is relishing the notion of being assassinated. He's actually kind of taunting people, saying, come on and assassinate me and make me a martyr if you want to. And I know that his name begins with a P, but it's not coming to me right now and everything. And then even Putin himself is, there is talk that the military itself may be coming after him and that he might not make it till the springtime because it may be a military coup. And I guess the question I've got to ask you is that going to be, we know that Putin is a horrible individual and a definitely not worth the salt and all in that kind of space. But that being said, is a military coup going to make it better or worse in the war, or will they just go all hails in if they knock Putin out, kill Putin, or whatever they do, and it is the military leadership that takes over? Because I'm always hearing that through several social media sources, is that Putin might not make it to springtime.
Well, I think the Putin is marked man. I think his end is coming, and from what I heard, his favorite movie, which he's watching every night, is The Last Days of Gaddafi. And I think there is a reason that he loves that movie, because that's what he will try to avoid. Whether he will or not, we'll see, and I hope pretty soon. I think that a very interesting development is that in Munich, in I think 17th of February, there will be the international conference about the peace in Europe and how to achieve it. And if you remember, it's exactly in Munich when Putin had his horrible speech in 2007, which led to all the further developments, where he was extremely aggressive towards the West and United States, including, and so on. So this time, you know who will be representing Russia? Michael Khodorkovsky, who spent 10 years in jail in Russia on the fictitious charges, and our friend, great chess champion Garry Kasparov. They will represent Russia, not Putin, not any of his clones.
Well,
Kasparov is an enemy of Putin.
Thank you for that insight, and I think we're just going to monitor the situation. We do hope that Putin is taken out of power. Netanyahu was asked yesterday whether he would intervene as an intermediary between Russia and Ukraine. He said he doesn't want to intervene in U.S. affairs, but if asked, he would consider doing that. We'll see. Of course, I'm a little bit suspicious about his relationship with Putin. I don't really trust anyone that works with Putin. But real quickly, let's go to Nikki Haley. I want a heads up, thumbs up or thumb down. We have some Republicans on the show. Start with Dan Worthington. Dan Worthington, what do you think of Ambassador Haley stepping into the presidential race? You're not happy. Tell me why. Tell us why.
She just doesn't have the experience or the acumen to do it, and she's not going to get the support of the Republican Party.
So she's just not going to have the base behind her.
No. She is basically. I mean, here's the thing. Democrats. Your party and the party of all the bleeding heart liberals have tried to demonize patriotic Americans, people that believe in freedom and liberty and traditional American values, because it's not convenient for your new agenda to try to just destroy or remake America the way you want it. Which
I think she's assured to place on the ticket, though. I do believe she will be the VP nominee, whoever the Republicans run.
I don't think so.
You don't think so? I think
no.
She does foot the bill as a former governor, UN ambassador. She's got a woman.
You're just wishful thinking, because you want your tribe in the White House one way or the other, and I'm all anti your tribe. I really don't want your tribe in control. So,
I think
not that I'm just kidding. But I think all the Democratic BS that you just espoused at the beginning of the hour, pumping up Kamala, was just that. We know she's incompetent and incapable. We've seen many examples of that. You might have been wowed by the star power and brown nosing you had to do when you were meeting the vice president. The fact she's, her parents are from your neighborhood is nice to know, but hey, it doesn't impress me. Trump doesn't impress me anymore either. Of course, he never really did impress me. I always thought he was kind of a clown, but the point is his policies were right on. So you're a bad mouth, and his foreign policy his foreign policies were very effective in getting.
I don't understand how you say that. I mean, his foreign policy was
getting NATO to pony up. He had the first. Abraham Accords were very successful, and a shining example of what's possible when you're not into building the military-industrial complex and starting wars, like Biden and the Democrats like so much because of their friends in the military-industrial complex and all the ring-kissing elitists that the Democrats are trying to surround themselves with, instead of considering the needs of the American people their liberty, their
Dan,
freedom.
But
oh,
I think
Dan,
the
I've got to
funniest
stop
thing
you
is
there.
you
Dan.
make
I've
me
got to
make
stop
me
you there,
laugh.
Dan,
Created
There's
the
nothing
worst
wrong
civil
with
war that ever existed.
no, Dan,
Bush
hold on a second.
was
I've got to stop you because
I mean,
what
I-
political
Record-making inflation. People are poorer than they were. Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Oh, hell no. The economy is a disaster. Gas prices are a disaster. I mean, it's all this is all a production for show on the Democratic stage, where they're trying to control the media, control the narrative, trying to make people believe what's not true is true, but where blue is purple, and I mean, where men are women, and vice versa. It's all a messed up situation the Democrats are responsible for, and you can't defend it. I mean, it's so freaking obvious on the face of it that I don't understand why you even affiliate with the party, other than the fact that you're a brown-nosing Democrat.
Well, I'm
Well,
not.
Dan, hold on a
I'm a
second.
moderate. I'm a moderate Democrat that's won the most votes in every election I've ever run.
You are moderate. You're
Anytime.
moderate for now. You're not going to be moderate. If you go to D.C., you're going to hop on the bandwagon with the rest of the liberal idiots. You won't even care, because you're going to put party over politics. You will, because you're so enamored with the D.C. and the flashing lights and everything else. You're trying to build your celebrity brand.
Dan, your vision.
I'm not against that. I like you. It's just that don't sell
I like you
yourself.
too,
Don't sell
I think-
yourself to the damn Democrats. It's
but
not
Dan,
worth it.
I mean, but I think the fact
Be
of
a
the matter is
Munson
that
if you're going to be a Democrat. Be a Munson,
fact-
right?
the fact of the matter is that the Republican Party. First of all, I just want people to know that I have a number of Republican friends. I have a family that are Republicans, and I think Republicans do have good ideas. And I think good government is about embracing the best of these ideas to move America forward. But, I think if there's any lesson from the midterms, it's that people are ready for something other than Donald Trump. I mean, give me, whether it's DeSantis.
Look at the number of votes of Republican versus Democrat in the midterms. When you look at the total vote count, there was a huge disparity between Democrats and Republicans.
But maybe
big Republicans were millions of votes ahead, and so it just didn't show up in the numerical count with respect to the representatives. So you guys try to make this claim that I'm not supporting Trump. Don't get me wrong. I don't want him to run again. I don't want Biden to run again.
Yeah.
I don't want that idiot Department of Transportation guy to run, because he's an idiot. I don't want Kamala to run because she's an idiot. We need to find statespeople, men and women of good character, of courage, of faith in our real constitutional process, not what the Democrats try to make the Constitution, and to bring us back to what we were as a country, a unifier instead of a divider. And Joe Biden was supposed to be the quote unquote unifier. He's been one of the biggest dividers along. Between Obama and Biden, they were the biggest dividers that we've seen. He said Trump was. Oh my God. Both those guys.
Dan, hold on a second. I gotta call you on a couple of things you just said. One, and I'm gonna bring in an ally who actually may surprise you as an ally in this conversation, because we don't always agree on everything and all along those lines, because we do disagree on some things here in the show and in nature, just in life in general. But last time I checked, the military aspect and the foreign affairs aspect, it was not just Democrats that were selling folks down the river, if I can use that expression, and everything in that space. But as I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sasha, and everything, I think that you have brought up the fact that both Bush and Reagan didn't exactly do Ukraine a big time favor either, and everything in that space. And last time I checked, those were Republicans and Republican leadership in that space. Am I not correct, Sasha? Because I think that you brought this up a couple of times, but I want to hear from
why do we
Sasha.
care about that? We're in this support because of Biden, not because of them.
Okay, but the thing is,
poor leadership, his weakness.
Yeah, but see,
That's why
Dan,
we're here.
Dan, okay, when you're hanging the Democrats on war, I switched parties when George Bush got elected.
Right.
The guy who took us into Iraq, if you recall, and that was a Republican last time I saw. And he not only that put us trillions in debt, he not only that created a recession. So when George Bush came in, I left. I was going like, this is just no
And
way.
that's because he was a globalist. So it isn't
whatever he was, he certainly
the globalists are
he
the
certainly
problem.
was a big
Globalists are
mistake.
the problem because they're all
Yeah.
part of the same cabal. I mean, the globalists are the issue. Whether you're Democrat or Republican, globalists are against America as it traditionally exists, against freedom, sovereignty, liberty, all the things that are very important because they have their own economic agenda. They don't care about American people, not the person on the street. They do not care. They only care about their own self-interest, their own corruption. I mean, just look at all these politicians, Joe Biden included, and the amount of corruption that's taken place behind the scenes. How the security services, the CIA, all of the others have been corrupted to the point of no return. FBI have been corrupted and politicized. They're pushing one agenda, and that's the global agenda. And that's the thing that's dangerous.
What do you mean by a global agenda? I mean, all I saw is, okay, we invaded Iraq on a pretense, and there was no substance behind it, really putting us behind the 8 ball financially, and also putting us behind the 8 ball dealing global affairs.
Who did it benefit? What
globalist?
Who did the war in Iraq benefit?
It certainly benefited the military-industrial complex.
You're right. There you go. Bingo.
Yeah.
But you know what? With all due respect, he has an excuse for doing so because it was happening right after 9/11. So it was not time to make rational decisions, and that was not a rational decision for what it
for a lot of different reasons, Sasha. I mean, the thing is, if you saw what Bush did, he cut tax rates on rich Americans, seriously, and then he established a huge debt for the war. Okay, so how can a good Republican who voted for Dole, like myself, and all the other Republicans stay in a party that believes in stuff like that? You can't. You can't be a Republican. And I hate to say it. Can't
it's
be a
a
Democrat.
great contradiction.
Because you run into the extremes on the other
they're
side.
globalists. They're globalists.
Yeah, right. Well, the thing
IMF, World Monetary Fund, the international banks, all the dark money that goes around and back around the world that people don't really understand that how they print their money, and you know about this. I mean,
well, yeah. I mean, on then we flip to the other side. Here's the problems I have with the Democrats, Steve. Even though we all like you, but they spend money like it's water. Of course, there's inflation. You know, the thing is, they have no fiscal responsibility or control whatsoever on the pocketbook. And so it used to be tax and spend. Now it's borrow and spend. And sooner or later, hey, that Washington, D.C. game's going to collapse.
Also, I think the weakness, I've got to run in 2 minutes, guys, but I think the weakness is first, we'll come back next week on Nikki Haley and what this means to the presidential race. I do think that the non-Trump vote will be divided, and that Donald Trump, I do predict, will be the Republican nominee because I think he's got too much ground.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. I think it's going to be DeSantis.
I think he's the front runner, though. I think he is the front runner. But here's my take. My final closeout before we leave, and we'll be coming back and talking a little bit about just on Black History Month, just Black Americans who we believe contributed to America, whether it's famous people or people that we haven't heard of. But I'll end with this. I think that the Democratic message, if you look at even North Carolina, I think it's not working outside the urban areas. So I do really believe that the Democratic Party has become, as Fareed Zakaria said, the party of the urban elite. And they're not talking about issues that affect the rural areas of the state. And I think this is true around the country. And so
it is.
The problem is that they were able to win the presidency last time largely because of COVID. I think there hadn't been a COVID.
Largely because
it's very hard to beat an incumbent president. But now it's going to be hard to see whether they can defend their policies. And Biden has been kind of, all over the map instead of really coming with an agenda, lots of executive orders, lots of money coming in. And I think this is going to be the challenge the Democrats face in North Carolina, where, they've lost the Republican Supreme Court. They've lost the supermajority in the Senate. They're one house away from the supermajority in the House. I don't understand the Democratic Party officials in North Carolina that are coming in and saying, re-elect me to the party because we've had a really good year. I don't know how that's a good year, but
isn't a good year.
Only time will tell. But I'll be back tomorrow, and then maybe on Friday. But I want to thank you all for being with us, and once again, a pleasure to be with each of you on Roku and Pod TV.
Yeah,
be among you.
Look forward to seeing you and everything. I did have a question for Nick and everybody else, and actually I'm going to get to another issue that is somewhat related to Black History Month and all of that. But before I get to that, one of the things I was going to ask is, what are we thinking about the rise of charter schools? And apparently that is a big issue in New York, because apparently Governor Kathy Hochul is going to propose changes that are going to potentially let dozens of new charter schools open in New York City as part of the state budget that she's going to unveil today. So she says that she believes every student deserves a quality education, and we are proposing to give New York families more options and opportunities to succeed. So her proposal is going to keep a statewide cap of 460 charters in place, but eliminate regional caps to make 85 more slots available for new charter schools anywhere in the state, including New York City. So any idea around this notion of charter schools? And apparently it's a big deal there in New York, because they're going to apparently get some more of them going in that area. And I do know some folks that are big fans of charter schools, and I've got some folks that I'm hoping to bring onto the network here that can talk to us about charter schools and just the state of education in general. But what are folks' thoughts about this notion in New York? And I think it's other parts of the world, and definitely the United States, that are looking at the rise of charter schools as a way to make a better public school system. Because I do know, Nick, that you said that that's something we got to do, is improve our school system some kind of way.
That's where it changed.
Public
Yeah,
schools-
let's hear it from Dan.
Public schools are failing Americans, and they're failing American children, primarily because of the control of the public schools by the unions and woke agenda, liberalism ideas, taking parental rights and smashing them along the side. Parents who are involved and want their children to succeed have to have educational choices, because if they're in a bad public school system, they need to either go to private education or something else that works for them. Anything that gets away from the corrupt public school systems is going to be helpful. You're not going to be able to straighten out the public school system as long as the unions are involved and their money and influence is there. Their educators are a big part of the Democratic Party and the Democratic push, and the Democratic policies. We know they don't work for America. They don't work for American families either. And so anything to break the mold and to make progress there is going to be better than what we have, because we're now teaching to the lowest common denominator. We don't reward excellence. We don't encourage excellence. We're losing in the battle of education because we can't compete. The reason we can't compete is because our schools and our educators suck.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and this is an issue that I agree with Dan on. Okay, so the thing is, and it's only because of also my personal experience. Because first of all, I bought the liberal agenda, public schools, everybody's uniform. Then I taught in the public school system, and my wife tried to teach, and she has a master's from USC, but she got bounced because of what Dan says, the agendas that the unions have that keep good people out of their schools, like no kidding. And so what you have is you have this vice grip monopoly in our education system. It's a monopoly of what they call the public school system and their public school garbage. You have no innovation. Now here's the charter schools. The jury's out, but still, since it's so bad in public schools, you might as well try the charter schools. You have a possibility for actually innovation and excellence by reinvigorating our education system, which is so 18th century to begin with. So when you have a system that's so bad, which is our public school system, which the unions do have a vice grip. I've seen this, I've witnessed it, I was there. The only thing I could do, Mark, is quit. Because the thing is, and same with my wife, she quit. We just go, good people will just not be involved. And I talked to some of the teachers there. Same thing.
Speaking of that vice grip, hold on a second. One of the things I've got to ask, and it's one of the issues I was getting ready to get to and everything, is I hear what y'all are saying about DeSantis, and I'm not saying DeSantis is not the foot runner and everything, but he's doing some things that are going to be divisive. There are a number of folks that will say that AP courses of certain types are really just teaching nothing but African American history in general and covering the history of the African American community. And then we've got DeSantis that is revised and put out some new versions of what that is. And they have some people that would say that history in America started in 1619. Some people would even argue before that, when the first folks landed and everything. And then some people would say that the history starts when the actual creation of America was created in 1776 and all in that space. But last time I checked, history was when we can even go further back, because there were actually Native Americans here even before 1619 and all in that space. And don't know that we've got a definitive date as to when they arrived and all in that space. But definitely there is a lot of just basic history that is out there. And I'm not sure that that basic history is covered in general, whether in a charter school or in a public school. But one thing I will say about charter schools is a number of the charter schools are able to have a lot more freedom, because there are charter schools that are specifically geared toward one community or another. There are charter schools that are engineer or science based. There are charter schools that are based on certain cultures. There are charter schools of a number of ways in that space, including some charter schools that are religious charter schools. So you're able to have a little bit more choices within the charter system, as I understand it.
Okay, well, when it comes to Black history, this is just my experience. It may have changed zillions of years. You know how much Black history was taught in Tampa, Florida, HB Plant, Mark? How about zero? Okay. Zero. In other words, the thing is, there was no Black history. DeSantis doesn't need to eradicate it. It was already eradicated. And HB Plant is touted, oh, what a great public school. It's one of the top. Garbage. The first time I took a Black history class, I had to go to college. And then there was a guy from Ghana who taught it. Seriously. Okay. And that was it. So the thing is, Black history is basically eradicated in the United States. African American history, in other words, African history, eradicated. Eurasian, Asian, nothing. India, nothing. All these places should not exist. The only thing that exists in the US system is the United States and Europe and predominantly England, the United Kingdom. That's it. And so what happens, and this is another good reason to have a charter school, because charter schools can have the freedom to actually teach education in countries other than the United States and the United Kingdom, which is right now, at least, again, this is my experience. Maybe there's some other schools they went to and they go, oh, yeah, we got a broad education. We studied.
No, but Nick, unfortunately, a lot of hero worship, too, because that's the other thing that happens is that too often you look at any group, whether it's African Americans or whether it's Mormons or whether it's a number of others, it is the heroes of those movements that are covered, when there are a lot of people that are the unsung heroes that are oftentimes not dealt with, even though sometimes they did as much, if not more, than the Malcolms and the Martins, the Fredericks and the Harriet Tubmans, which I think just about everybody knows those names. I don't even have to say the last name without people knowing who they are and everything. But unfortunately, there are a number of other folks, including the folks that were in Hidden Figures and a number of other places.
And Hidden Figures was hidden for how many years? Until that movie was made, no one had a clue, Mark. I mean, so the thing is, what you have is, and this is the reason I'm hopeful for charter schools that can actually create innovation in history. They can create innovation in what Steve just described, small businesses. Like I said, there is no classes that you took. I actually bought a book, How to Open Your Law Practice Without Missing a Meal. I mean, seriously, there was 2 books on starting your law practice, but none of the teachers in the MBA programs, that goes back then, taught anything about how to open your own business. Okay. None of them in the law school taught you how to open your own law firm, where 80% of lawyers, Mark, 80% of lawyers practice in 1 or 2 person firms that they own. Right. Okay. So this goes back to our education system being so weak, at least into entrepreneurship, that charter schools can actually fill the gaps. They can fill the gaps on history and hopefully innovation. Our current system is controlled by a union, the National Education Association, and what they say, they dominate, and good people leave. Okay.
No, I
And
hear
so
what you're saying, but Nick, just to switch to another topic, just really quickly, and everything just goes across my mind. But there is a group of folks that is known for being very much entrepreneurial and all in that space. And last time I checked, they're getting shifted left and right all around the world. Now they're being shifted to Brooklyn and all in that space. But I've been having the fortunate pleasure to meet a number of folks that fall in the migrant camp and all in that space. And definitely they are some very entrepreneurial individuals, whether they are coming from Mexico, whether they're coming from Venezuela, whether they're coming from Brazil or a number of other places. But some of them are going into farm jobs in certain states and everything, and sometimes they are starting their own businesses, sometimes without even doing the farm work and everything. But then they get shipped off to New York City, where apparently they're being camped out in front of Hell's Kitchen and are even looking at having some conditions at an emergency shelter at the Brooklyn Cruise Terminal. So there are actually a lot of people that are concerned about what's going on with that migrant community. And apparently, Mr. Abrams over there is begging for some help while the folks are there in New York and everything. And definitely they even got some signs saying seeking asylum in New York City. So what are our folks about the way that we are treating these particular group of migrants that are apparently getting shifted?
You mean illegal aliens? You're talking about illegal aliens? People are here illegally? Is that who you're talking about?
I mean, these
will be deported and sent back to the countries of their origin.
I mean, would it make more sense to send them there, or would it make more sense to send them to like New York City if they came into Texas or everything? Because apparently, what Mayor Adams says is, I just had to come here when I started hearing all the rumors about it was too cold. My brother has got on shorts. It's warm inside about the food not being there.
But they're the idiots that chose to be sanctuary cities, right? I mean, they ask for all these people to come. Send them to San Francisco. Let them camp out on Pelosi's porch. I don't care. The point is they shouldn't be coming anyway because they're here illegally, because our border enforcement people don't take care of them the way they're supposed to be taken care of.
In my other company, Mark, I actually had people that immigrated from South Africa. Mm-hmm. And what they did is they did it properly in terms of filling out the paperwork. Now, granted, the system's broken. It took them 10 years before they could.
I was going to say, what about those extended stays? Because it's my understanding that that's actually, until recently, I think that it is the ones that Dan is talking about that is the majority now. But until recently, it was actually extended stay visas. People that were coming from India and other places were the ones that were the majority of the folks that are the quote unquote illegal immigrants.
Mark, you know what upsets a legal immigrant more than anything is the illegal immigrants. But here's the reason why. Like Priscilla, she goes, I had to stand in line. I had to do paperwork. I had to hire attorneys in some cases. I had to bust my chops to get in. Okay. And it's like this. If you ever stand in a long line, somebody comes in and they skip the line and say, hey, I want the ticket. And you're standing 50 to 100 people back and somebody just runs up front and takes the line. The thing that makes legal immigrants the maddest is the illegal immigrants that skip the line.
But no, I got that. But Nick, my point is that I hear the immigrants complaining, but did they complain about the people that are doing the extended stay that are actually technically illegal as well?
Who's illegal as well?
The folks that are here on an extended stay, they're breaking, like they're here on those visas, and then they are staying here way past the time.
This goes back to a couple tweaks in the law can change all of that. Like I said, in crimes, you have what they call a statute of limitations. Seriously. In other words, if you told me, hey, Nick, 5 years ago, I broke into a house and I stole a bunch of stuff. You can't be prosecuted because the statute of limitations on theft has expired. The problem we have in our legal system, and I did some research on it, there's no statute of limitations for the crime of illegal immigration. If we had a statute of limitations saying, hey, look, you've been here 5 years, you haven't committed a crime, and now you turn around, you make them legal, I wouldn't have a problem with that, because right now our system's broken, and you got somebody, it's a crime at the time that it was created, but after a period of time, the statute of limitations should run. Now, why Congress? Because remember, this statute of limitations concept came from England back in the 1300s or whatever. Okay, why they don't have a statute of limitations on this, quote, crime of illegal immigration? Tell me why. Why is it that it's okay if I rob somebody or I beat Sasha up, but it's 5 years has taken place, and all of a sudden I'm free as a bird. I said, yeah, I beat the heck out of him 5 years ago. So,
Well,
but
I mean, there's definitely got to be some reforms done just around the legal system and everything.
No, I
There's
think
definitely got to be reforms done totally. But as we're winding down, I did have to ask another quick question of everybody,
put a
and it comes
statute
back
of
to illegal
limitations.
immigrants, but it's more about even the climate and all in that space, because apparently there's a lot of stranded animals that are showing up left and right, because apparently a stranded humpback whale died on the New York beach. I know that right here in Durham, we had a beaver that popped up literally out of nowhere. There's like an American tobacco area, and the beaver was in a fake lake and everything. So, and then we had that disappearing monkey. So are the animals to go back to the movie narrative that we were talking about earlier? Are the animals trying to come back at us humans and everything? I mean, unfortunately, the stranded humpback whale did die on the New York beach earlier today, but I'm seeing like these crazy cases of animals, including those disappearing monkeys and everything that are popping around and everything. So are the animals trying to get back at us?
No, the animals have always had issues. In other words, no matter where you go. In Florida, the big problem is you have these you have illegal snakes that have come into the area, and they start eating alligators and stuff like that. So,
no, you got illegal snakes, but one of the other things y'all got in Florida, because I remember many years ago when I was working at the Boca Raton News, there was actually a family that found a lovely manatee stuck in their house and everything, because I remember covering that story. The manatee was literally in their, I want to say it was in their back carport area and everything. But
manatees are definitely endangered species. But another important topic, and this is one reason I think agendas are so important, I think the number one agenda every day should be the war in Ukraine, because if there is an atomic war, it affects everybody here on the panel, everybody around the world. Okay. Mm-hmm. Atomic wars are not good. The other thing that should be number two on the agenda is the economy and the Federal Reserve, because what they do affects everybody. I know there's all these little stories there about
since you're adding agendas and we're doing the Pod TV agenda, how about we add gun violence and everything? Because apparently there was a shooting earlier today at a Target in West Omaha, and of course there was also an incident that I know that actually our other president of the network talked about, because she has a friend that was involved in that murder down there in Franklin.
I mean, it should be on the agenda, but if you want to prioritize your agenda, let's say you're Congress, the first thing that they should be discussing every day is the war in Iraq. I mean, we're in Ukraine. In other words, that should be number one priority, is safety of all Americans. Then the number two priority should be the safety of everybody's economic pocketbook. And the Federal Reserve is about to act. And I know Sasha has a show on this. I'm not sure if they're
2 hours.
Later on today, yeah,
later on today.
But the thing is, that affects everybody's pocketbook, Mark. I mean, if interest rates go up, that affects bloody everybody. Guns, yeah, that's an issue, but it's down. It
affects everybody's pocketbook.
Not everybody's going to get blown away by a gun.
And some people would argue that it even affects it more, because I know some people that are basically like, are we going to keep talking about the war in Ukraine when I can't even find enough to pay the bills or to have food in my own personal refrigerator? So I definitely think the war in Ukraine is an important issue, but I do know that there are a number of people that are going like, I can't wrap my head around it because I'm trying to get what I need to survive and all of that.
That's the reason the Federal Reserve and the economy is so important, because it affects everybody in the United States. And when I talk to people internationally, they say, no. What happens in the United States, because our economy is so big, we're still over 25% of the world GDP, affects everybody around the world. So what the Federal Reserve does today will affect not the U.S., but everybody around the world. And so that's a very important topic. Media, though, doesn't cover stuff that's important. They have their own agenda. They want to cover the bleed and lead first. Let's bring the guns in first. The guns are down there. They're an agenda item, but it may be fifth or sixth on the agenda. Number one should be getting blown up. There's a probability but to me, that's a pretty, mushroom clouds do exist. And then another thing is the economy, stupid. It's the economy.
The economy is then. That's definitely what some people have said. I know we're winding down. I'm going to try something a little bit new and a little bit novel. I hope that's all right with folks. But since it is Black History Month, I thought that maybe at least once in a while, maybe even every day this month that we are doing shows, we'll go with a historical figure. So today, let's hear a video about Sojourner Truth. And this is a little bit about her, who is one of the historical figures and all in that. I might find somebody else on the other days as well. But let's end with a little bit of lessons around Sojourner Truth. who, by the way, was an evangelist, Dan. So you might enjoy hearing a little bit about her as well.
Great.
Would you dedicate your life to improving the lives of others? That's what Sojourner Truth did. This is the story of a civil rights pioneer who fought for a better America. Born into slavery in 1797, Isabella, as she was originally known, was separated from her family, beaten and sexually exploited by her enslaver, John Dumont. But in 1826, she managed to escape and found refuge with a family of abolitionists who helped buy her freedom. Isabella then learned that Dumont had illegally sold her son, Peter, to enslavers in Alabama. So she took Dumont to court and won back custody of her child. Around the same time, she experienced a spiritual awakening, claiming that God had scolded her for not living a better life. So Isabella began to champion all types of causes, including women's rights and the abolition of slavery. To mark this new chapter in her life, she changed her name to Sojourner Truth. Despite being illiterate, Sojourner delivered her famous Ain't I a Woman speech at the 1851 Ohio Women's Rights Convention. And during the Civil War, recruited thousands of soldiers to the Union Army. President Lincoln was so impressed, he invited her to meet him. Following the war, Sojourner lobbied the U.S. government to grant land to newly freed Black men and women. She died in 1883, having devoted her life to campaigning for a better America. How are people continuing Sojourner Truth's battle for equality today?
That was a little bit about Sojourner Truth. I might bring in some other folks as well, but like I said, she was also an evangelist, and I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts around that great lady that was around during that period, but she definitely did a lot of powerful work, and that Ain't I a Woman speech is a very powerful one, and I may play that later as well. It's about a 4-minute speech. It's not as long, so we won't do it on this particular news show, but it is a very powerful speech that she gave in that space.
Mm-hmm. Really good.
Cool.
Good
so
work.
on that, we'll get ready to get on out of here, and we got some other shows coming up later on as well.
All right. We'll see you.
See you.